But this is where this whole childlike thing comes through again. When we're childlike, when we're in the moment, when we're connected, we start to realize, oh, wait a second, I have a different purpose to have. I have a different purpose to fulfill. Even that idea of having purpose. What is purpose? Purpose is living, isn't it? Purpose is life. You're already here. This is purpose. You are purpose. So I wanted to relate, I feel like I'm going in circles when I say this, but by the way, before we start, I actually was going to make a video, I was going to post a video that I already recorded on my frustrations. It's more of reactions to many things. But I was not in a good space, because I was kind of like, yes, it's true, some of the things I say, but when I say true, I mean, like, at least for me, it resonates well, which I still strongly believe in. Like, for example, I don't believe in, what do you call this? Always making things super technical, to the point where, like, even things like this, when you make a video, it's almost like, because I used to do that a lot. Now it's more like I use technicality for the sake of just when it functions in that specific way. So for example, when I'm trying to analyze something so that I say it properly, it's bringing consciousness to what I'm trying to say. That's kind of, I would say in a way technical, but not really. What I mean, okay, let me put it this way. So when it comes to being technical, it means that we're trying to overanalyze something. Like, for example, like something simple as like idioms. I see this a lot in my students, and that's because of the program that they're in, the way it is structured, because most of the things they do is there's translation, and it's everything's literally taken literally as it is. Like, for example, there's this one idiom they were trying to use today. They were saying hit or miss. They literally think it means like hit or miss. So they couldn't understand how to use it. It was like, well, that's an idiom. It's not literal. That's the thing about this whole thing that also bothers me. But I'm not like resisting it. At the same time, I also don't want to give over the power to being reactive to it. For those who understand what I'm saying, great. For those who don't, just go with the flow right now. The fact is, as humans, we like to put things in boxes, and it's not helping anymore. At least not for me. Okay, keep in mind, not for me. However you go about in your journey is how you go about it. Okay, I'm not going to be one of those people who tell you what to do anymore. I do just highly want to share, and hopefully that, for those who agree with it, great. For those who don't agree with it, great. Doesn't matter. It's really about, for me, what I'm trying to share is what I feel strongly about, that I do want to change how people see languages, because it affects me directly. And yes, it's a me thing. And this is where I get to, for some people might consider this like triggering, where it's like I don't give a fuck anymore. But it's more about how my love for languages, it's not so much because it's language, because I've at least kind of gone through it, meditated on it, and wondered, why am I into languages? Why do I love languages? Is it because of culture? Yeah, partially yes, because it's, it's unique, it's foreign, it's attractive. But what is behind that? Why do I like culture? Well, because it's the feeling behind it is what's going to determine for me what is going to determine why I like it in the first place. It's the feeling I get when it comes to languages. It's like an adventure. You go to some place you've never known, or you go to something, you go into a culture, you look it up, you kind of read about it, you kind of, okay, that's kind of interesting. Then you read the history, where it comes from, influences behind it, etc., 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 and so forth and so on. Okay, there's so many, many, many reasons behind the reason behind the reason. When I say behind the reason, I mean like those factors to why we like it. So for me, one of the main things is just it feels like an adventure. And we all change throughout our lives. We grow, we get older, we change. Part of our personality changes. There's still that whole thing. That's the basis of there's still something, there's still like the foundational you, so to speak. So for me, it's the adventure, but it's also relating with people. And that's the whole thing. That's the part of it. It's relating with people. You know, as not to be stereotypically, but also having fun with the stereotype kind of thing here, is that when it comes to being a Libra, we love love, we love relationships, we like relating to people, we get energy that way. So this is one of the reasons too why I actually enjoy culture. Or languages, for that matter. Right, so, but the thing that I wanted to add to what I was actually recording before, I wanted to kind of, I guess, revise it, so to speak, is that when it comes to the intention of in this adventure that we want to take, why are we getting into language? Because it's something cool. It's something. Some people get really technical about it. Okay, so fine. They go into the grammar. They go into the textbook. They do the memorization. They do the apps. They do the apps. They do this and they do this. And that's their thing. That's your thing. That's your thing. For me, though, I find that that doesn't work anymore. At least for the past 10 years, it hasn't been working. Or rather, I stopped about 10 years ago. Because I realized that it's like, one, there was no genuine fluency. I used to think that fluency was like, oh, I just know things. I know 10 million words. I remember. I have good memory. I have eidetic memory, so I know what to say. I don't believe that. Fluency to me goes way deeper. We think that our mother tongue is the only thing we can be fluent in because we acquired it. Meaning like, as a child, and when you're a child between the ages of 0 and 7, we act based on the subconscious. We act based on something, we act on basically natural things, natural way of doing things. I mean, when I say natural, I don't, see, people are caught up in the words. I think it's the intention which we should read, which is part of communication, which is an important and vital part of communication, right? It's body language, right? So, go with that. So anyways, what I'm saying is that when we're children at that age, we're sponges because we're basically, everything is, how do I put it, reactive. Everything is all in terms of like what's basic. Carnal, call it wild, call it whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. The point is, that is the point. For me, at least, that is the point. So, shouldn't we do the same thing as adults? That's where I guess you can say, call it like the rub-off is, right? When we get into adulthood, we think we know better. We think this is better. We think we just know this because we're technical, we're more informed, we're more this and all that stuff. There really isn't a better or worse. It's just that as a child, when it comes to, or at least when it comes to the idea of genuine fluency, why not go from the beginning how it started? Doesn't that make sense? For those who understand this too, doesn't that make sense in a linear perspective, the third dimensional perspective? That you go back to the original, you go back to the origins, you go back to the way it was, how you acquired your mother tongue. So what do children do? You ask yourself. They're just in the moment. They're present. We were present. We were in the moment. We absorbed things. We trusted the moment. Even if we're going to die the next day, even if our head was cut off, even if we were disemboweled, even if we were raped, we were still in the moment. Of course it caused trauma after that, but that's part of the subconscious, right? You see, people might not see this as, some people might not see this as like, how the fuck is this all related? It is. But most people are trained and brainwashed and conditioned, whatever the word is, to work and overuse the left brain, or, as I also like to relate it to, the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, right? The point is, that's not the fucking point. The point is, at least for me, that we go back to the original, the origin, the original, going back. Sometimes I get tired of having to reword this because many people are very much stuck in the whole, I'm going to compartmentalize something because of the upbringing they were in, because of the orientation, because of how they were taught in schools. So they think that that's just how it is. Especially for those who are stubborn, they just want to stick to the way it is. I can understand that because I can be stubborn as well. So, but my point is what works for me. Again, this video is all about me. Okay, it's all about shining and, well, maybe not shining right now. The point is what works for you. Not necessarily right now, but if you observe it and you go through the process, does it feel authentic? When you're speaking in a language, when you're not about just speaking, it's also about the listening part. All of it, the flow of it, the whole thing. Do you have fluency? Just because you remember certain words, just because you know so many words, just because you have eidetic memory, just because you do this, just because you do this, is that really fluency? Because isn't the definition of fluency automatic? Because I mean, technically, when I'm devil's advocate here, I was thinking about it, even as I grew up bilingual, so I understand what it's like to have fluency in both languages. And of course, there are degrees of fluency, but that's how we put things in a box. Fluency is fluency. A river, does a river start off like as a big, raging, like rapid kind of river? No. It can start out like with trickles, right? Because if you imagine how things form, it depends on the environment, whether it's actually manipulated or naturally done. Either way, there's something happening. What causes a river to form? If you look at everything, the components of it, because we do this a lot as humans, we like to break things down. If you look at the formation of a river, from a layman's term, from a layman's understanding, this stupid person, like myself, which is fine. I'm not trying to dumb myself down or anything like that, but from a simplistic view, how can it be? Could it be? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, okay? But isn't that the formation of rivers like this? Like, okay, so doesn't it require like a push of the water to form? But what pushes that water into something? Let's say you have because everything, it all goes back even to the very beginning. Like, how did the formation of the planet form? Like, if you look at the formation of the rocks and the dust and coming together, and asteroids and meteors all coming together, there's going to be unevenness, right? But then water came, apparently. This is apparently the research, this is the theory, that water came from meteors, and they're like, okay, so but water, right? But water flows. So what happened to that landmass that used to be fucking like a million degrees hot? What happened to that to start cooling? How did it happen? For millions of years, how did it, like, you see what, there's something missing there. But even then, based on that thing, which is apparently this show called How the Earth, not Earth, the Earth Border, Earth something, it's by National Geographic, I don't know. The point is, like, how did rivers form through that? Right? Because there's always going to be rubbing of other molecules together, so that's going to create change in surface, and it's going to change. That's the way molecules work. Solid doesn't always remain solid, right? It's always changing its form, especially when it's coming in contact with other molecules, other atoms. So it's always forming. We just don't see it from this myopic point of view that is the very human, right? That's form, but that's what it is. And that's also why I'm doing this whole thing where I'm trying to break it down. I don't feel it's necessary, but I'm trying to. Well, I was trying to. So the point is no longer to break things down or to be technical about it, at least for me, but just to trust the moment. Trust in the moment that even for me, when it comes to people who, let's say, want to translate things all the time, want to get the answer right away, which I don't agree with, want to post things on YouTube that are all about, like, this is how you do it, this is how the best, da da da. I'm just like, no, not for me. Go ahead and post those things, but I will not watch your video because it's not working for me. Not because what you're saying is wrong, it's just what you know. That's it. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about, for me, what has been working for me, at least recently, and also what I've grown up with as a bilingual person. Okay. I never remember anything from Filipino. I don't remember the grammar. I know the grammar now, but I never really acquired it through. I never acquired it through that. I was just surrounded by it. That's it. As a child, it was never translated to me what this means, what this means. As an adult, yes, it was. My dad still does that. My dad goes like, this is what it means. He translated it into English, and I'm just like, why are you translating it? So I don't remember it. It's never worked for me. It's never worked for me. The only time I ever used translation, and this is not to pinpoint translation itself, or even like, blame translation or as if it's wrong. That's not what I'm saying. It never worked for me because it doesn't work because it's the way I perceive things in English is going to be different from the way you perceive it in the other language, which is Tagalog. So I don't see how this word can be translated to this. Maybe you could make the excuse and say like, oh, if you're talking about toilet paper, what is toilet paper? You're probably wondering, how do you have toilet paper? But how do you translate toilet paper into one language to the other? Isn't it exactly the same thing? Okay, sure. With concrete objects, things that are like, that you can actually touch and sense and feel, whatever. Concrete stuff, right? But the moment we get into things that are more abstract, I find those are stronger, or those are much strongly related or connected to the culture behind the language. When I say culture, I don't just mean like, this is the food we eat, this is the stuff we do, this is the dance we have, this is the music. No, I mean behavior. Why? What is the cause of behavior? Isn't it the resources that you have? Okay. But what is that? There's a hidden component to it. It is the subjective part of it, which is much stronger. That's also how the subconscious works. At least as far as we know. Okay? So what I'm saying is really in this whole video is that as far as we know, this is what works. This is why some people just like who make videos the way they do, that's as far as they know. Although instinctively, for me, I've gotten past those things that they do, where they still review the grammar, they still review the vocabulary, they still do all these things. They break it down to its little components, and they just don't know. They forget that the whole main purpose is to really what do you call this, interact with the experience of life. The reason why it's, for me, why it's become very powerful is because when I'm enjoying something, the word is fun, right? Fun acts as, let's call it a lubricant, okay? Okay? It's a lubricant for having the information go from the frontal cortex, the short-term memory, to the long-term further down. But it's even more than that. Fun, meaning like it's not just fun as in what we perceive as fun. Fun as in where you just feel like you're just... Keyword is, I always say this, and this is probably the umpteenth fucking time I'm saying this, and I'm saying this because it's the things that a lot of people are still doing really upsets me. Is childlikeness. Now, I've had someone comment on one of my videos. He says childlikeness. He had to break it down even more and overanalyze it and whatever he was doing. I was just like, why the fuck are you writing that? It has nothing to do. He compared childlikeness to childishness. And I'm just like, yeah, that's what you're referring to, childishness. So I was just like, what's the purpose of this? So anyways, obviously you didn't watch the video. It's fine. A lot of people do that. They do the preview. They go like this. They look at the title and then, ooh, I'm going to comment on it right away without even seeing the point. So it's like this, I don't know what it is. It's like a malfunction. A lot of people have become malfunctional, whatever, right? I mean, so this is what's upsetting, because we've gone so far off intuition and instinct, as if it's like the stupid thing. And I'm like, what do you think controls your functions in the first place? To be honest, it's the subconscious part of yourself. Why do you think we react? Why do you think we have trauma? Why do you think there's ego? That's rooted in the subconscious. When I just say subconscious, I don't necessarily mean like the subconscious part of the brain. I also mean the things that we have no control over, because it's rooted in instinct. A lot of it is actually instinct. Feelings, emotions, sensations, experiences, right? It's kind of things like, it's simple things like putting things in your mouth, tasting it, feeling things, sensations, right? It's just because we're so far off the path that we think we analyze everything to a point because that's what we know. But it's actually there. We all have this ability. We all have instincts. If someone was going to chase you and eat your parts off and cut your dick off, or rip a part of your neck because they're hungry, or maybe because they're a cannibal, what do? You just sit there and just like, okay, right? No, you run off. That's what your instincts are gonna say. You run your fucking ass off. You run. That's instinct. So that's, you see what I mean? But it's hard to. I'm pretty sure I'm sounding like a megalomaniac here, but I feel like it's like we need to really just go back. We really need to go back and understand it. But it can't be done through just simple like watching a YouTube video. You need to experience it. You really need to experience it. So this ties back into this experience of acquiring language. And how the fuck do we do this when we're actually going in through, like when we usually just have access to online things? We can't travel. We can't go abroad. We can't connect with people. Okay? What do you think what do you think you can do? Think of resourcefulness. How can you bring, here's a hint. If you can't go there, okay? So you make the best with what you have, but sometimes we think in limited perspective because of we were conditioned to feel limited. We are conditioned to feel that this body is so limiting, and because we identify with it, therefore everything else we do has to be limited. We think that money, for example, money comes in only form of money, or money comes in some form of like income. But what is money? What is money? Right? So that's the symbolism of money. The symbolism of money, or the actual thing of money. Money itself is a symbolism of freedom. Money represents freedom. Freedom to do what you want. Freedom to exchange for something that you want. But that's just on a physical level. Isn't there abundance everywhere? Isn't money supposed to be a symbolism for abundance? So what is language? Isn't a language supposed to be a symbolism for relating? So how can relationships be limited to just speaking in one language, let alone, thinking that this should only be this way? How we relate with something, how we connect with something, our relationship with something. The same thing. People tell me all the time, well, I can't travel, I can't go out. And it's like, well, I mean, if you're talking about minor languages, like people call minor languages, like underdog languages, I can understand that it's really hard. There's nothing really out there. Like say if you're looking at, I looked at something simple, like even something that's become quite well known, like even something like Scottish Gaelic, beautiful language. Are there a lot of resources on it? No. So people are basically relegated to go back to the traditional way. This is a trap. This is a trap. Right? So then we make plans to move. Now this isn't about the language itself. This is about relating. So it all comes down to, we can do what we can. There's no judgment at all. If you're going back into the traditional ways of translating, how do you call this, doing the apps, whatever, memorizing things, because you have no other access to anything else. You can't acquire languages because there's nothing out there. Fine. But I bet you, there's more than enough. You have to kind of sometimes, resourcefulness has nothing to do with just sticking, because this is, for me, the word resources, or being resourceful, usually for me means like I kind of obsess while I'm doing search, or when I'm doing research, I stick to it. But I also started realizing that sometimes, that whole resourcefulness thing, this ability that we all have, can be spread out in whatever, can be spread out. So you don't have to be necessarily resourceful. Like what I mean, like resourceful, I mean like I'm equating it to doing all things at once, doing everything in one sitting, not being so obsessive. But by all means, if you want to do that, go ahead. So, but I mean why I'm talking about resourcefulness right now is because when it comes to things like looking up cartoons, which help with acquisition, because they're easier, and that's what I do. However, this is what I also noticed. Sometimes cartoons that are out there, let's say underdog languages, let's say maybe Swahili or something, it's just going to be like those old cartoons. And a lot of times it doesn't resonate with a lot of us. You're like, one, maybe because we don't like cartoons. Number two, as adults, we don't like cartoons. And number three, maybe because the content of this cartoon just doesn't make sense. Or number four, in some cases, like for me, there are some cartoons that are only, what do you call this? A lot of them are like religious. So for me, that doesn't resonate. Like, barf, right? So, right? It doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't like click. Nothing clicks and like, kind of turned off right now. So it creates a block, right? So you can't always force yourself to watch something that you don't want to watch, right? And that's the whole thing too. Like it's so you see how things are starting to connect. Hopefully, things are starting to connect. That there's no real way to do things because of one, there's resources, access to resources, where, location of resources, right? Connection to resources, so like actual, you know, human resources like people, money. There's so many factors. And I could say something like, where there's a will, there's a way. But where is a will? Like, why do you want to ask yourself then the question, why do you want to learn this language? If the motivation is mainly because you have to, personally for me, that's not a strong motivation. Because you'll get sick. You'll get tired of it. You could be like, oh, I have to do this. I have to go to class. I have to learn this. I have to study this. Right, etc., etc., etc. For those who haven't gone through that, that's probably what it might be, but you gotta experience it for yourself. So what's the point of this whole fucking video? The point is that there shouldn't be a point. The point is that you do what you can. There's no judgment, especially from yourself. And that sometimes you have to just make a choice. When you get into a specific language, for me personally, I don't see language as just, oh, it's a language, like as if it's a subject, right? I try to look for things that are interactive. And sometimes, you know, if a language is not the language you're looking for, something that has no resources behind it. And when I'm saying resources, I mean resources that are actually, let's say, conducive to acquisition. And I'm not even talking about the method of language acquisition. I'm just talking about where it feels natural, where you feel like, as Stephen Krashen says, and again, I'm not really promoting it, I'm just using his word. He says, fun, easy, compelling. Fun, easy, compelling. Fun, easy, compelling. It's simple things that a child would do. Compelling means you feel like you're part of the story. It's interactive. That's the better word for that. For me, it's the word interactive. It feels like it's interactive. English, it's easy, because there's tons of fucking like resources out there. Okay, I'm swearing that because it's like it's hilarious. It's ridiculous how many sources there are in English out there. Literally, you can get. There's no reason to not acquire English naturally with all the resources out there. Literally, there is no excuse for that. Well, maybe there can be, of course, depending on where you are, right? So naturally, yes, of course. But for things that are less, things that have very few resources to it, or almost none, like you look at something simple like Mongolian. There's hardly anything out there except for like, there's some people posting videos on it, you know, so we're kind of reliant on each other when it comes to these kind of things. But are there people who feel motivated to share a video, sharing their story, or doing language in their story using, you know, hands TPR methods and using pictures and drawing and making it interactive, or they do it like they show you it's a cooking show and they're doing it in their language, there's no translation, very easy, very comfortable, very like, oh wow, it's kind of compelling, it's interactive, etc., 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 etc. You feel like you're like, and you're actually understanding it, and as you keep watching their videos and they keep making more and they keep making more and more and more and more until it gets to about 1 million videos for that channel, or a bunch of channels, whoever they are, whoever it is, whoever he, she, it, they are is. Are there people that can be doing that? No, not really. So this is where this whole childlike thing comes through again. When we're childlike, when we're in the moment, when we're connected, we start to realize, oh, wait a second, I have a different purpose to have. I have a different purpose to fulfill. Even that idea of having purpose. What is purpose? Purpose is living, isn't it? Purpose is life. You're already here. This is purpose. You are purpose. So when it comes to something simple as like language, or the idea of language learning, or even language acquisition, the point goes back to its origins. Not the human love, but love. Okay? There's resistance to this. I've seen it time and time again. Because we're very distracted as humans. We're very conditioned as humans. We're very scared as humans. We're very fearful as humans. We're very judgmental as humans. We're very... all these labels we like to put on each other, we like to impose on each other, we like to kill each other for, we like to slit each other's throats for, we'd like to massacre each other for. Okay. But I think we've had enough, don't you think? Right? It's no longer about trying to solve anything. It's about allowing for it, allowing through the compassion. Children have compassion. We think we've lost it because we're so jaded, as we like to call it in English. We've become so jaded. Become so fucking jaded that we no longer know what it's like to really be unconditional. Even that becomes a trigger. Unconditional? Oh, you mean like just sit around here and do nothing? Right. Again and again, it's a cycle that repeats itself. But there will come a point where that cycle, that vicious cycle, becomes so toxic, so disgusting, and you're just like, enough is enough. Enough is enough. So, I hope that does something. I don't know. You make the choice. Do you want to continuously live in that vicious cycle of fear, hatred, separation that in turn also affects something as beautiful as connecting with people, rediscovering the purpose that is you, whether that is to help spread the beauty of communication through language and therefore promote more people to actually acquire and become more fluent, and not talking about quantity here, talking about quality, to the point where we actually become a global community and just relate with each other normally through stories and stories and stories, and without judgment, and being present for each other through compassion, empathy, just being present, and just not worried about time and death. Do we want to get to that point? When I say point, I mean, really there is no point. It's already here. But do we really want that? Or do we still stick to the status quo? The belief that the conditioning in our heads, the conditioning of the mind, the belief in the stories within our head, the fictitious, there's a purpose to fiction, right? But that's for, that's the beauty about fiction. Fiction can be beautiful. Fantasy can be beautiful. But if we start to own it as if it's the reality of who we are, really, that's something else. So do we want to go back to that? Do we want to stick with that? Do you want to stay in that muck? Or do we want to shift it? Do we want to go, oh, okay, the person's enraged. I can sense they're very angry. Compassion tends to happen when we've only experienced the lack of it, right? So that's my take on this whole thing. I feel like it's definitely directly connected, for sure. Even if it's not, it's indirectly connected, whatever, to fluency. It's just natural. It's a natural way of relating with each other. There's fluency in everything. There's flow. When there's fear, it constricts it, right? It's just like the emotions. There's the spiral of emotions. Fear is near the very bottom, right? So what happens with that energy? It's very constricting. This is why when we get angry, we have low energies, or rather when we don't honor that and be present with those negative emotions, those very like dense emotions, it feels stuck in here. Doesn't that feel toxic? Doesn't that feel like you can't breathe? Exactly what it is. So, we make a choice. As Buffy said in the TV show, here's where you make a choice. So,